All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Infrastructure as Code Live, another episode. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you're having a good evening, or whatever time of day it is. And hopefully you're ready to talk about some infrastructure as code. So today, topic for the stream is going to be having a look at Bicep. So if you're not familiar, Bicep is the new version of ARM templates that allows you to use a more streamlined language. And this has now gone, they had the release of version 0.3 the other day, which has production support and feature parity-ish with ARM templates. So we're going to have a look at that, look at some of the new features in particular. We're going to have a look at how we do loops in Bicep, because that's been missing for a while now. And so yeah, we'll have to play with that and see how that goes. But as always, if you've got any questions about any sort of infrastructure as code topic, I'm happy to answer those. Just put them in the chat and we'll have a look and we'll discuss those issues as and when they come up. So yeah, any questions, just let me know. So I've updated my Bicep version, hopefully. So let's just double check. We should be on 0.31, yep. So this is the newest version of the Bicep CLI. And I probably ought to check the plugin. I think that probably should have updated itself anyway. I think that's probably up to date. Okay. So we'll do a bit of an intro if you're not familiar with Bicep and haven't used it before. So let's quickly open an ARM template so you can see if you're not familiar with ARM templates. Let me find an example. Yeah, so this is an ARM template. This is the syntax that's been around for a long while. This is how you write infrastructure as code using the native ARM tooling. And this is all, you can see it's all JSON. And there's a lot of it, and it's not the most readable thing in the world. And it can get quite complicated to do if you're doing a lot of resources, a lot of nesting and dependencies and so on. So what Microsoft have released is this project Bicep, which is a DSL on top of the resource manager ARM templates that hopefully allows you to simplify your templates. Now this really is aimed at people who are either coming new to ARM templates, so there's quite a high barrier of entry to ARM templates if you're coming in and you've never used them before and you've got to get to grips with this JSON. So that's one area they're aimed at, or people who are using ARM but want to simplify things, want a more easy to use language. And you'll see in a minute, it's not all that dissimilar from things like Terraform in terms of the language. There's a lot of other things that are different, but the language actually syntax is not too different. So yeah, this is all available in GitHub. You can read all the specs. They've been quite open with the development and the actual, the specs and so on, and taking contributions. So you can access all that in the GitHub repo, which I will stick in the chat if you are interested in having a look. So we're going to have a go, and we're going to start by bringing up the specs. So this is the specs for loops, and I'm going to have to remind myself of the syntax because it's been a little while since I've used this. So let's actually go and look at a quick example, just so I can remember the. And there's a lot of good examples on here if you want to have a look. They've basically taken a large amount of the ARM template examples, of which there were a lot, and turned them into Bicep examples. So if you want to have a look at anything, you can do that. So we'll just have a look at that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a simple Bicep template, and let's go ahead and we're just going to keep it simple to start with, using the old favourite of creating some storage accounts, and we just want to create some storage accounts based on a loop. And so we are going to do that. So I've already done that, but yeah. Okay, so we'll start simple. We'll just hard code things and then we'll parameterize it in a minute. So what we want is an array of storage account names. Now I can remember the syntax for doing arrays. I think it was in here, wasn't it? Do I need to declare that in here? Let's find an example of an array that we can steal. There we go. Yeah, so I'm just going to do a storage account and we'll say so we've got our array. I don't need quotes, do I? Yeah. Remember the actual, what's it complaining about? It doesn't need that either. I guess the syntax highlighter doesn't like it anyway, so we'll just do that. Okay, so we're going to add a resource now. So the way Bicep works basically is not dissimilar to ARM templates. You have variables, you have parameters which will emit, and then you have resources, but you don't need all the JSON syntax. You'll notice I don't have, if you look at the actual ARM template, we've got all these sections that are labeled. You have to put parameters in here, you have to put variables in the variables section, and so on. We don't need that. We can just do it in here, and so I want to create a storage account. Yeah, and so we're going to give it a name. I don't think I need quotes, and then we need to give it a type. I still haven't fixed my Visual Studio Code to figure out why it's only giving me this very tiny box. I need to look at that, but we'll come back to doing that in a minute. So the way resources work in Bicep is it's the same as with an ARM template. So in an ARM template, you would declare, let's find a resource. You would declare a resource and you would have a type, and it would have an API version. So we're still declaring that, but it becomes part of this header. So you can see we've got storage account / storage accounts at. So this is the version that we're going to use for that spec. Then we can actually create the resource. Now, so normally we would then do this. Come on there. Just going to check the examples. Yeah, I've still not got the syntax memorized for this, so I'm going to have to refer back to these, unfortunately. But so this is how we would create a normal storage account. And so we would come in here and we would give it what the values for a storage account. Storage v2. Again, don't need commas. I'm too used to. We also need do that as well. So we'll just look at a simple one here. Yeah, so I'm just gonna. Just gonna steal that. So we already had that in wait, we'll just do that. Okay, so this is going to deploy a storage account, and we're ignoring this at the moment, which we will. We will turn this into a loop in a minute. I'm just going to quote those to get rid of the errors. I don't know why it's complaining about this. That is the name. What have I missed? Resource. Okay, we're just going to go ahead and save this and see if we can run it. So let's call this storage. Okay, so one of the things we have to do, so Bicep is an extraction on top of ARM templates. So it doesn't do away with ARM templates altogether. What it does is it allows you to compile Bicep files into ARM templates. So what you're actually deploying is ARM templates. So you need to do a compilation step. So let's see if this all works. What the command is. Build. Okay, so it still doesn't like this storage. Don't like that anyway, but what's wrong with this? Let's just check. I'm not using a reserved word or anything silly, am I? Should work. I have built working Bicep templates before, I promise. Let's just run the tutorial. Just going to copy and paste that in and see what I've done wrong. Oh, I'm messing up now. Right. We need a name for our storage account. So we're just going to put this in here at the minute. So at the minute we're not using this array, we're just going to make sure we can actually generate a template. So let's try that again. Okay. So what we get now, we see we've got this storage.json in here. So if we hop back over here and look at our files. So this is created an ARM template. So this is what actually gets deployed. And you can see it's translated this language, which is simpler, into the ARM template. Now, you know, there's not actually that much different here for a simple storage account, but once you get more complicated, there is a potential benefit here. But you can see it's translated that. So now we've got that working, we can turn that into a loop, which is the new feature we want to look at today, is how loops work. Another new feature we're going to have a look at, I think, is there is an ability apparently to automatically have it compile and deploy the Bicep file for you. So instead of doing what I did there a minute ago and compiling it and then I'd run new AZ resource group deployment, in theory there is an extension we can use to do that as well. So we'll have a look at that in a minute. As always, if anyone's got any questions while we're waiting, do go ahead and drop them in the chat. I'm more than happy to answer questions as we talk through this. This is just today's topic, but we can talk about anything, so just let me know if you've got any questions. Right, so to add a loop, we've got this new syntax where we've got this for piece. And I'm guessing, yeah, that closes down there. Okay, so what we should be able to do, yeah, it goes there, okay. We've done a different name. And close that. Now, yeah, okay, so obviously we need to use the value in here in our resource. So this is no longer going to be that, it's going to be that. Okay, now the syntax highlighting in here doesn't seem to be overly happy, but that just might be that the extension hasn't been updated yet. I don't actually know if it has. So let's see if this actually compiles, which it does. So that seems to work. So if we have a look now at the arm it's generated, it has now added the copy in, or the copy section, to our for loop. So this has translated a bicep for loop into a arm template for loop, and it's added the name of the copy. That's taken that from the name of the resource, and then you can see when it comes to actually looking at the name, it's translating this. So it basically looks at the variable, which is our array here, and then it uses the copy index to look up in that array. So that's how ARM templates will do that. And this in here, we're using this for loop. We don't have to deal with a copy index or anything like that. We've just got this simple for loop which has this. Now, one thing I noticed from the spec, if we look in here, there are some things it doesn't support. In particular, it doesn't support the index syntax yet. So if you wanted to use the index, which is not an uncommon thing, where you actually want to go and look something up based on the index, you can't do that in Bicep yet. So that's not quite there yet. So this example here, so you want to use the loop in it, we can't use that yet. So we can, in theory, do nested loops. Or can we? Was that one on the list? No, apparently it's possible. So we can have a look at that. I'm trying to think of an example. I'm trying to think of what a usable example for nested loops is. What's this says? Batch size decorator. Okay, so we can control the parallelism of the for loop. So when you deploy, so by default, it will deploy concurrently in a non-deterministic order. So it will deploy the resources all at the same time. So maybe we don't want to do that. Maybe we want to do them one at a time, or maybe we want to do them two at a time if we've got more than that. But we can set the batch size here using this batch size annotator. So let's try that and see how that actually impacts the template. Apparently it does not. So I think that syntax is right. I doubt that makes a difference. No, apparently that doesn't work. So I wonder if was that on the list of things that don't work? Nope. Okay, apparently, well, we'll come back to the batch size later. It's not going to work. But apparently we can also filter using the where keyword. So let's find an example of that. Okay, so this is let's try and look at this from. Let's create an array of objects. I wonder if that will do it. So we could. I'm going to need the syntax again for objects. I'm sure I saw it in here somewhere. Objects. There we go. Yeah. So we'll go ahead and create an object. I'm just going to pinch this and adjust it. So instead of having get rid of most of this, so we're going to say this, and we also then want so let's try that. And what I want to do is add multiples of these. See if we can do that. So we should be able to do is then refer to each object directly and just replace that with skew. And I'll get rid of that batch size thing in a minute. I'll get rid of that. And does this work? Okay, so apparently it does. So let's have a look. And that's you can see there that's worked. That's created that for us. So what we could then do. Hi, Carol. Sorry, I didn't see your message there. So yeah, what we could then do is have a look at doing a where syntax. So let's say we want to filter this and only deploy storage accounts that use standard LRS. So let's go and have a look back at that syntax. So it's just where, yeah, so storage account dot storage account skew. These are all booleans, so let me just do. I don't know if this will work. I don't actually know if this is the right syntax, but we'll see. No. Doesn't like that, so I did see somewhere loops with conditions. Yeah, maybe okay, maybe it doesn't do that. So let's add another item. Don't know why you'd ever do this in real life, but you never know. So let's try that. Have I missed something? For storage account, in storage account names, where storage account dot deploy. makes any difference. Nope. Okay, so what are we missing? I'm going to copy and paste this in just so we can compare. Looks pretty much correct to me. Anybody spots anything I'm missing, just let me know. Unless it just doesn't work. When it talks about, I guess there's no filtering, so maybe that doesn't work yet. Maybe this is just... You would have thought it would have a marker like the loop one that says not yet implemented, but... Hi, Richard. Yeah, you would have hoped that would have been marked the same, but I guess not. So that's annoying. Just check this still works. I didn't mess something else up. No. Okay. Well, we'll leave that trying to do where stuff for now until we find out whether it's actually implemented or not. But we've at least been able to work with this array of objects, which is quite nice. What I also want to have a look at is, well, firstly, is there anything else that should work that probably doesn't? Yeah, there's an indexer, so that's not going to work. Okay, well. That probably doesn't help us then. Okay, well, as I mentioned, what I also want to look at is the ability to compile and deploy at the same time. So this was a new feature that was added as well. So let's try and find how we do that. Is it part of the actual file? Nope. See if I can find where I saw that mentioned. I'm sure I read it somewhere. While I'm looking for that, say if anyone's got any questions or any comments, just let me know. Happy to answer them. Yeah, so there is a CLI command, so... And there's a PowerShell one, I think, as well. That's just going to run the same commands that we can do from the CLI anyway, so maybe I made this up. I know there's some community stuff. Let's have a look at the Bicep PowerShell model. No, okay, maybe I just made it up. um, maybe I just made it up. Okay, well, let's go ahead and try and deploy this file now we've got it working anyway. So we'll do that. So what we'll do is create a new resource group. And we'll go ahead and deploy this. Okay. So what we should be able to do is we can deploy this file directly. We can also, by the looks of it, pipe the output of the bicep command to a hash table and then deal with that. So let's try that. Well, we're going to have to install the PowerShell commandlet first, aren't we? So let's do that. Okay. And what we want to do is this example down here, compile it as a hash table. Stick that in here. That's a good question, Richard. So yeah, what do I find easy to use? ARM templates, Bicep, Terraform, or just Azure CLI? It really depends what I'm doing, and I'll add a third one in there. So I've been doing quite a lot of work recently in Pulumi as well, and writing C# code to do the deployment. So it depends what I'm doing. If I'm doing something really simple, just need to quickly deploy some resources. I don't want to have to care about state because all I want to do is get a resource running, and you know it's fairly simple. Then using ARM or Bicep is probably the easiest way to do that because I don't have to care about managing how my state file is and dealing with different workspaces or anything like that. I can just quickly spin something up and tear it down again. And so it'd be one of those two. And to be honest, if I was writing something fresh now, I'd probably do it in Bicep. It's an easier language to deal with. You got to deal with the compilation step, but I think there are tools we can work around that. If I'm doing something more complicated, where I've got lots of resources that with dependencies or lots of things that I want to do deployments that flow into each other, or nested deployments, or just more complicated things, or where I want to tear all of them down at the end of it, having where states a benefit, then again that would be where I'd look at Terraform and Pulumi. And to be honest, at the minute, if I asked me to do pick one of those two, I would use Pulumi at the moment, just because having worked with being able to write C#, it is so much easier to do more complex things like loops and conditions, and also talking to external resources and those sort of things. So if I was doing more complex things, particularly where I needed to do things across cloud providers, or doing Kubernetes stuff on top of Azure, where I need more than just Azure, then I would look at using Pulumi at the moment, probably over Terraform. So we just pass this template in as the template object is where we pass in our hash table. And in theory, that should work. Let's see if that deploys. Now, I mentioned at the minute we've got this storage account names array as a variable. What we can do is we can turn that into a parameter as well to allow us to parameterize the template and pass in variables at runtime to make it a bit more usable. So we can do that in a minute, but let's just see if this deploys first. Yeah, Richard, I think it's certainly worth having a look at, particularly if you do if you know programming languages. It's not just C#. You can use other languages as well, like TypeScript and Node and Python to do that. But I find it quite a big benefit at work because we've been trying to encourage developers to do more of the infrastructure work, and obviously being able to do that in a language that they understand rather than having to learn a new language has been pretty beneficial. Okay, yep. So that worked, and we've got that deployed. Okay. So if we go have a look in the portal, we should have that resource group. And in here, we should have our 2 storage accounts that it's created. Yep. There we go. Yeah, but you saw there from the demo that we had to have this array of named storage accounts. So it was a what you can't do yet is have a variable called and use that in our loop. So it doesn't support that yet based on what I was reading anyway, as I understood. Where's it gone? Yeah, no variable loops. So, yeah, which I mentioned earlier that Bicep is on feature parity with ARM. It is and it isn't. I mean, yes, it has loops, but the loops, in my view, aren't as good yet as ARM. So, we're going to have to wait a little bit to get the full parity of those things. But I'm sure it won't be a long way off yet. And depending on how much looping and conditions you do, it may or may not be a concern. But what we can do is, instead of having this, let's comment that out for a minute. What we can instead do is again, I'm going to have to check the syntax. Array. So we can do that, and then what we're going to need to do is we're going to do a parameters file, and it should have been JSON. So at the minute, parameter files in Bicep are just the same as the ARM was. They're still JSON. So it's using that same syntax. There isn't a Bicep version of the parameters file. So we're going to have to just translate this. I'm going to have to remember how to do JSON arrays, so we're going to have to wrap that, aren't we? To be honest, I think it would be nice if there was a Bicep parameter file option as well. And get rid of that because we're not actually using that. get rid of all of that. We need that. This is where it gets slightly annoying. Nope, not got a format JSON for me. Okay, fine. We've got an extra brace somewhere, have we? That's right. Missing one. There we go. Okay, so we should now be able to compile that again. So we'll do the same thing. We'll put it in a hash table again. We should be able to then do that, but we're going to have to press the parameter file this time, which is storage params, and it doesn't work. I probably missed something. Storage account names is the name of the array. This is probably not the best name for it now that we've turned it into an object, but never mind. Okay. I've not changed the name, have I? There we go, yeah. So we need to No, we're not going to recompile that because it's coming in from the parameter file, so we should just be able to run that straight off the box. And that should now deploy. And what we'll do, we'll come in here and we will add a third account just to make sure that works. And see if that works. Sure if that's the right syntax. We should, because it's a parameter file, we don't need to compile again, so we can run that again, and hopefully that should now create a third one, and we'll go and check that they're all the right types. So yeah, I think the loop syntax here is nicer than what we have in ARM template. So the ARM template loop, you have that count property, and it doesn't, you know, you have to give it a name, which makes no sense because, well, it makes sense if you use the name to refer to it, but barely anyone ever looks at using that name. You use the count index usually. So this, I think, makes more sense. You know, if it follows a classic for loop like you would see in any other programming languages, it makes some sense there. And then you can refer to that easily by calling out the name you've given to the item in the for loop. So I do think that's a better approach than the current ARM one. It should be simpler for people to use. Okay, that's gone ahead and created those 3 accounts for us now. So if we look in here, we should now see we've got SA1, which should be LRS, which it is. Storage account 2, GRS, and storage account 3 should be ZRS. Yeah. Okay, so we've done some fairly simple loops with our Bicep file. Now that was the main new information in Bicep, the main new features, but I'm happy to talk about any other features. So is there anything anybody wants to look at from the Bicep spec or is interested in? So let's have a quick look and see is anything else been added fairly recently? With the resource scopes. So this resource scopes allow you to deploy your Bicep file at a particular scope. So if you've ever used ARM templates, when you run ARM template deployments, you define the scope. So whether it's a resource group scope, so everything you deploy is going in a resource group, or a subscription and it's all going in a subscription, or a management group or tenant. Yeah, so the interesting thing here is whether you can do... Yeah, so you can't. So with ARM templates, if you wanted to deploy at multiple different scopes, you would effectively have to create multiple different files. Now it looks like at the minute you still have to do that because you can only have one scope. They have this syntax here for using multiple scopes, but it's not been implemented yet, so we can't use that. Yeah, but you can. So one of the other things that Bicep has is the ability to declare or create modules. So this allows you to sort of wrap your code up in a file and modularize it and share that with other people, create a self-contained piece of work. And they can be deployed at different scopes as well. So you can actually put the scope in at the module level as well. Now, modules behind the scenes, if we compile them, are just nested ARM templates. That's what you'll get out of it. So if you've ever used nested ARM templates, you will know you can specify the scope. You can specify a subscription and a resource group they get deployed to. So it's taking advantage of that. Okay, so you can get global functions to get the scope. I can use scope to define a resource scope as well, which is quite interesting. So let's try that one actually. So you can define a resource lock on a storage account. So they're using this scope here to actually specify that the storage account. So let's try and combine that with our loop here. So we've got a lock. We want to put our loop in again. On the other side of the equals. So we can do that. And hopefully that will take the name. This will put a resource. If you're not familiar with resource locks, they allow you to basically put a sort of marker on the resource. In this case, we're adding a delete lock that prevents anyone from deleting the resource. Now you can delete the resource if you go in and delete the lock, but you can then restrict who has the ability to actually delete the locks. So that you have to, A, it's only a small limited amount of people who can do it, and B, you have to think about it before you actually do that. So let's have a look at how that compiles. If it does. That's fine. I'm missing the closing bracket there. Okay, that seems to have worked. Okay, so we've still got our storage account up here in our copy loop. That's not new. And then we've got this lock option. So again, it's put a loop in. Now that's interesting. Yeah, so it's created the actual lock object, but I can't see anywhere in here where it's actually referencing the fact the lock needs to be applied to the storage account name. Let's try and run it and see what happens. I reckon it will fail, yeah. Yeah, because it's defining that multiple times, which we can fix. So we can do here strings and things in Bicep out, and I just need to remember how to do them. Don't need to use concat anymore, I just need to remember what the syntax is. Anyone's got any questions about what we're doing or anything else, just drop them in the chat. Happy to answer them. Anybody remembers the syntax for doing. Is that we go? Yeah. Okay, that should work. Template resource format. Broader storage account. Yeah. Good call. Got that wrong. Try it again. Okay, so it appears that's created it, but has it actually added our resource locks? So in theory we should go in here and there should be a locks option. So I think that's just added them at the top level. Yeah, so it's added them at the resource group. So we've got 3 locks at the resource group level, which is not really what we wanted. So I wonder if there's an issue here with it working with a for loop. Let's try it without a for loop. So let's just go ahead and duplicate this. Get rid of the for loop. Okay, get rid of this for loop. Close that. See if that works. Now I think I know what the issue is here. So I think the problem is the fact that this object here, or the scope object, needs to be an actual resource rather than what we've got up here, which is actually the name. Yeah, we actually gave it the story account name, which is not going to work because it actually needs a resource. And because we can't now do an index of this for loop, which is what this will probably need to look through to get the actual resource, we are probably stuck with that not being working with for loops until we can get the ability to do an index. Okay, so I bet that one worked. So if we come back in here, we've got this one, and we should have a lock. Yeah, so we've got a lock there at this level. Yeah, so that's not going to work with the for loop of that. So yeah, there are a few issues here with the fact that some resources are not, don't have. The for loop doesn't have all the functionality we would have with ARM. So yeah, if we have a look at the actual, if we compile that and look at the ARM template, you see we've got somewhere in here, we've got the lock here, yeah, and that has added the appropriate scope and dependency there, which we don't have with the for loop option. So yeah, that's not going to work with a loop either. Okay, well, we're getting towards the top of the hour, and I do have to unfortunately depart on the hour. I've got some work I need to do, unfortunately. So if anyone's got any questions or anything else they want to raise just before we go, do drop them in the chat now. I'll be happy to pick those up. Anything you want to know more about Bicep, or anything you want to ask about anything else, just let me know. Anything else cool in Bicep that we've missed recently? Yeah, we've done that. Could probably do a session on modules on their own at some point, how to build reusable modules with Bicep. I think that might be an interesting topic to talk about. Modules are fairly straightforward. You're just basically writing an ARM template and then wrapping it with module code and making it reusable. Be nice if we could combine that with template specs. I mean, I guess you could. I guess you could compile the Bicep into ARM and then push it into template specs that way. That would probably work. But it'd be nice to be able to have Bicep things that I think there's an opportunity, and I suspect it's going to come soon in the future, to have things that work around Bicep and abstract away the ARM template piece. So at the minute you saw there, we've got to compile the Bicep. I know somebody's already written an Azure DevOps extension which will compile the Bicep before running it. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if we see more functionality around that, possibly built into the platform. So like template specs, that you can upload a Bicep file, and when you come to run it, the Azure platform takes care of actually turning that into into the ARM file, and you never see the ARM, because the ARM that this generates, you can see here the ARM file that this generates is going to get complicated, especially if you start adding modules and things. You're going to end up with inline nested templates, which are really quite hard to read and so on. So really, this ARM template needs to become a disposable piece of intermediate language that you never really look at. Carol, you mentioned template specs are not multi-tenant. No, I don't think so. You can do it across subscription, but I don't believe there's a way to. One thing somebody raised the other week when we were talking about it was whether or not you could use them with something like Lighthouse. So that might allow you to do something, but no, out of the box they're not. But potentially you could do something. If you were a service provider, you could maybe have a template spec repository that you use, and then you have access to client subscriptions using Lighthouse. You could then use those template specs, I think, to deploy to the client sub. But yeah, in general, no, they're not multi-tenant. So you'd have to resort to Git repos and storage accounts for that if you wanted to do it across tenant. Okay. If there's no other questions, then I will drop off. Sorry, it's got to be bang on the hour this time, but I do have to go and do a bit of work. Next week we'll try and do it a bit longer, but yeah. Hopefully we can catch up next week. I don't have a topic in mind yet for next week, so if anyone's got any suggestions what they'd like to see next week, let me know either here or on Twitter, and we can pick a topic that way. If not, I will find something. But yeah, just let me know, and I will be happy to look into that. Other than that, have a great rest of your evening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will hopefully see you all next week. Cheers.